Hello and welcome to today's Meet the Expert live webcast with the topic how to manage inner APIs versus outer APIs and what's the difference. Our today's speakers are Christian Reyes-Knoche and Michael Rehberg. My name is Dirk Krüger and I will be your moderator for today's webcast. And before I hand over to Christian, we will have some housekeeping items. First of all, we will send out the documents and the recording within the next days after the session, so you can recap and share it also with additional colleagues. If you have any additional questions during the session, please use our question and answer box, and we will try to answer the questions in between or at the end of the session. And finally, at the end of the session, we will have a survey, a short survey, where you can share your ideas, what's interesting next for you, and you can also rate today's webcast so we can improve further. So now I will hand over to Christian, and he will dive into the topic. Enjoy.
Thanks, Dirk. Welcome to today's Meet the Expert. Subject is how to manage inner APIs versus outer APIs and what is the difference. My name, Christian Reyes-Knoche. About myself, I'm a technical product manager at Sieburger. I have been working with Sieburger for the past 15 years and working for Sieburger since 8 years. It might be you know me from my time in consulting or professional service. If this is not the case, I look forward to making your acquaintance. Today, let's begin with a short look into today's agenda. We will start talking about inner and outer APIs. What are these? What is the difference? We will go over the subject API management. Where are we standing here? We will then talk about API management and integration, following with how this is solved within the Sieburger with the BIS API solution. And finally, my colleague Michael will address the subjects within a live demo. What are inner APIs? What are outer APIs? To explain this, I would like to use an analogy. Let us imagine we own a restaurant and we have a guest that arrives at our restaurant and wants to eat something. So he will look at our menu, our API catalog, and decide on something to eat, which API to use. He will then place his order, his request, forward it towards our waiter, our outer API. The waiter will then forward this order to the kitchen where the meal will be prepared. Once the meal is prepared, this is then passed on as a response to the waiter, and the waiter will, of course, finally pass this to the guest. If we look at this, this is a simple request that is just forwarded by the waiter to the kitchen and back. But we could look a little bit closer into this. No? Let's look into this kitchen. How about the structures within it? It could be composed of multiple inner APIs. Sorry. We could have, for example, a salad bar. We could have a cook in charge of the main dish, or someone also preparing desserts. All of that would then follow up into our inner API kitchen. Besides also something to eat, our guest, our developer might also want to have something to drink. No? Not use only one API, but maybe multiple APIs. This could be, for example, a bar that is providing drinks. And this bar also has a very small ice box. So depending on the amount of requests that are placed, it might have to consume an outer API in order to order more ice. So here we are adding against complexity where the inner API is even calling or consuming an outer API. Furthermore, we could also have a host. This host is in charge of making sure that all our guests are comfortable and happy with our service, and maybe even provide, for example, a survey as an API to our customers to know if they're happy with our products and whatever we provide them. Our restaurant, by the time, is also becoming more popular, and this adds a partner, a delivery service that is contacting us because they would also like to use and or offer our menu, our API catalog to their customers. So what are we looking at here? If we look at this closer, we are seeing that we have our outer APIs that are our products for our partners and external developers. The goal here is to provide these in an easy and user-friendly manner. Partners and external developers have no access to our inner APIs. These are protected. For example, the hostname of the backend is not visible, it's not exposed to them. The inner APIs on the other side are the products for our internal departments, our developers, an interface to our backend systems. So then how do we manage all of this? And if we are looking into API management, we might think this is a green field. But if we look, this could even be the case, but if we look into it closer, usually it is different. We have already a landscape, an existing landscape that has to be integrated to this API world. What do we see in this picture? Now we see high complexity, current and legacy systems, applications, or other assets that need to be connected. Probably high development costs to integrate inner and outer APIs. Time and costs come in here. Additional complexity layer due to maybe even the architecture, systems partially on-premise, some systems on the cloud, maybe even multiple clouds that are being used. We have some sort of mixed measure. This leads to the question, how should we integrate all backend infrastructure and functionality within the new API world? Our answer to that is API integration. The orchestration of inner APIs to provide complex outer APIs. The integration layer reduces the complexity towards the end user. Complex architecture should also no longer be an issue. If our inner API needs to consume an outer API, this is done over the integration. We can also apply central enforcement policies to protect our APIs, which leads us to increasing the security level as we hide our inner APIs and only provide the required data. If this subject is interesting, you can look for the keyword excessive data exposure. How does this look now within Zebra then? That would be our BIS API solution. If we look closer into this, the solution is composed of a BIS API portal, a BIS API integration, and a BIS API gateway. Multiple gateways can be added, as well as multiple integrations in order to scale up. Additionally, integration possibilities provided by our BIS integration suite can be used here in order to extend the platform to cover your requirements, depending on what you want to use, want to do. We kept also our scenario pretty simple. We used a gateway to provide our outer APIs to partners and developers. We could also move the integration more into the background and also use an BIS API gateway to provide the inner APIs. Use case could be, for example, here that maybe we have multiple departments and we need to restrict the access to data and similar. Now, a lot of words, maybe a short demo will show this more clearer. For this, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Michael.
Thank you, Christian. So, hello also from my side. My name is Michael Rehberg. Probably you might know me already, but for those of you that do not know me, my name is Siri. I'm technical product manager here at Seeburger, responsible for the business integration suite. And today I have the honor to demo you some parts of the scenario that we just heard to give you an overview how this works with our API management solution. Before we jump into the demo, I would like to ask Dirk whether there are already some questions which we should answer up front or whether I can start with the demo.
Unfortunately, we don't have any questions right now, so you can start with the demo and we will come back later.
All right, thank you very much. So here we go. Let's dive right in. Now, today I will be in the roles of API developers. And every time you see Postman, you know that I am in the role of an API developer or app developer, depending on the role, on the situation. And I will also be acting as a publisher, and this is when I am in the BIS front end. And I will also be as an integration specialist when I'm using, for example, the Master Data Navigator. So I will inform you about the role changes so you don't get confused. But today we will see a lot to have this whole flow from accessing it for the outside world, publishing the data so it's available in the outside world, and also implementing some small portions of the process. Okay, so what will be the scenario? We had this analogy from Christian, which said that we have a restaurant and we have people accessing our menu, so an API catalog or a list of menu entries. And therefore, what we did is we implemented an API that just returns you a menu with some meals and some drinks, which you can then browse in an web application, for example. Now, what you see in here as an app developer is I'm an app developer that is in the same company than as the publisher, and that's why I have access to the integration system. But for all other consumers that provide applications, they will be accessing it from the outside world via the API gateway. So if I send the request there, you will see there's a 404 because we did not publish or expose the API to the outside world. And today's demo will be all about how do I publish it, how do I handle policies, how do I implement it in the integration, and what else can I do very easily in the API manager. So let's dive in. One thing I forgot is to make it much more easy to understand when we are accessing the integration system directly or the API gateway, we decided that the URLs are easily distinguishable. And if you look at it, we used 4 times the 7 as the port for the API gateway. And if we are going to the integration system, it's 4 times the 6. I will probably repeat this part a lot in the demo, but just that you already know, 6 means integration, 7 means API gateway. All right, so let's dive in. We already said we have a 404, so we have to somehow expose that. Therefore, I have to jump into my role as a publisher of APIs, and I use the 2 applications, API Manager for all the management work and the API Catalog to show you how this looks to the outside world and what I have to do to expose an API to the API Catalog. So let's open the API Manager. It's pretty empty, so just for the purpose of not confusing with too many APIs in there, we will use an empty one in the MTE. And what we will do first is we kind of have to describe what we want to expose. So import the API, and you can do that either from scratch. So just describe it and then import Swagger definitions or SOAP definitions afterwards. Or you can directly use an IDL. IDL stands for Interface Description Language, which is like OpenAPI, Swagger 2, WSDLs, etc. So let's click on that real quick. Click on Upload and select the prepared Swagger file for demo. So that's a Swagger 2.0 file. We see that it parsed it correctly, and then we press Next, and it will read some metadata from there. And it will start to import this API, and we just have to click Create Default Rights because we will use it later on. And you see this API is pointing, I already start to repeat myself, to the integration because you see that we access the port 6666. Base path is /rest, and when we press finish, we have the skeleton ready to work with. So what happened till now is that we now have defined what is the backend. So the proxy is defined but not active, and we can set up some basic information like describing the API in a simple way, upload, for example, an icon to distinguish between products. We can define tags for easier filtering when we are going through a crowded catalog, for example. then we can add some documentation which is used by the app developer or API developer, and we can add additional contents like documentations, processes, records, whatever, so we can download them as well for the needs of your app developer. After we press save, all that part is stored. And what we need to do to expose this API is now we have to dig a little bit deeper, go into the endpoint and set the endpoint to lifecycle status, which is not in development, because in development means it's not ready for the public. There's two states that you can use there to expose it. One is beta, and it is marked as this, and it's public, generally available, and deprecated and blocked are pretty self-explanatory. So let's go to public for the ease of use. Press save, and the warning that you just seen is that you set the API to public, but you did not deploy it to an API gateway till now, so it will not be accessible, but we just set the lifecycle state. Now, when we are talking about exposing it to the API gateway, making it available, so to avoid the 404, we have to, as I said, deploy it on the gateway, and therefore we click on, for example, the inbound policy. We can set some policies which are necessary to be checked or to do transformations, change headers or whatever, and then deploy them, save the settings and then deploy them to the gateway. For our demo now, we will first of all deploy it with no settings apart from that we have set the backend. And when it's deployed, we can go to the API description, click on the description of the API itself or the resource, then click on test, set the parameter which we need there, press on send request, and then we will get an answer from our integration system. You see, same thing that we had before, but this time we did the call over our API gateway, so the proxying worked just fine as expected. Same thing, by the way, would apply also for the outer API. So when when I'm in the role of an external app developer, so if we use the API gateway call, press send, you'll see that also for the outside world this works. But how do I announce that there is something, or how can an external app developer know which APIs are available? Therefore, I have to go back and talk a little bit about audiences. So at the moment, there is no audience defined. So basically defining what kind of user group or what kind of users do see this API in the catalog. So just to show you that real quick, let's open the API catalog. You see there is no API available for external usage. And if we go back here, you can just assign the audience and press save. And as long as the user that is using the API catalog is in there or has the permission to see that, so is basically part of the audience, then he will automatically see the API there. And when you click on it, you see that he can browse the information, press test, but he is limited to the external access. So the publisher itself can also do calls on the integration system from test view. For an external app developer, this is not possible. Because he has does not have the permission to do so. Okay, how do I define audiences? In the API manager, I go to settings, audiences, and there I can add new audiences with this add audience button. And you can automatically assign this audience to APIs if they're already existing. And when you're done, you have to assign this audience to a group in UMS. So just to keep in mind, it's all done with our own IDP, the user management system or user management service, and there you can assign that. Okay, so what have we seen so far? Importing existing Swagger files, easy to do, exposing APIs to certain audiences via the audiences feature, and deploying it to the gateway via the endpoint configuration of each API. Now, that's great, but we heard something about data exposure, obfuscating or removing meta information that might let us guess from which kind of backend system data was there. So one of the topics that is, I think, in the top 3 of the OWASP top 10 API security topics is excessive data exposure. So don't expose too much data, to just don't tell people from where the data comes. And that is one of the, let's say, base ideas of the next part that we want to address, which is we fine-tune our API and implementation. And therefore, we use the Master Data Navigator of our Business Integration Suite. So let's jump in, start the Master Data Navigator. For our demo here, we implement a simple, or no, it's one simple, misclicked, one simple MFT flow with 2 branches for limiting the data that is coming from the API. So let's have a quick look at the MFT process. So what we see here is with this text to attachment, simple thing to emulate some backend systems. And then we just report back via synchronous reply over HTTP what we have put into the attachment. But you can imagine that if you use the powerful capabilities of our integration suite, you can imagine that calling external REST APIs, HTTP, accessing databases, ERP systems, whatever, can be added in here. Just keep in mind, as soon as you add more, the more hops you have, so to speak, the more latency you add to the response. We'll take care about that part a little bit later on, so show you some trick how to make it better, but this doesn't apply for everything. So yeah, do your housekeeping in terms of how much hops do you really need. Maybe you have to put some things via other integration flows into your some databases to aggregate them. Yeah, basically it's always the same. Define where data comes from, orchestrate it, and then send it back. This is the main flow. Let's have a look at the branches. So there's one for reply only drinks and reply only meals, and you probably guessed so. Same thing. So we emulated a reduction. So possible scenarios here are you using a mapping or a filtered REST API, or however you want to implement that, filter some SQL, use some prepared statements in SQL to get reduced information, or even enhance information. So it's up to you how you use it there. We just emulate it with text to attachment and do synchronous reply there, just with the drinks in this case. And how do I add this to the process? Yeah, just double click on it. Wait a sec, I forgot something. How do we decide what kind of data we return? So it might be either it's dependent on the API, so you can apply the filter criteria manually or hard coded or based on a customer within the process, or you have the API defining what are the requests. So basically an external filter somewhere. So in this case, for the demo, just to show it to you, we have added a parameter called request parameter, which is an enumeration which allows meal and drink, meal or drink, for the sake of time. So let's implement that real quick in the MFT process. Therefore, you use so-called conditional branch. Just drop it in here. You select which part of the branch should be executed. Let's start with only drinks. Press OK. And then in the condition, you just define what has to happen that you only report drinks. So in this case, we have the notation $, brackets open, then the parameter, brackets closed, and then we compare that either with some parameter that we have in the process or something hard-coded. In this case, we said we want to filter for drinks, so let's type that in, press save, done. Let's go to the API manager, click on tests, and then we click on drink and see what happens. There we go. The result is we have our menu and we only have drinks in there. So this works quite fine. So let's add the part for the meal as well. Again, conditional branch in there, select what data you want to report, click, and then the condition. Request parameter, is closed equals, and in this case, it's meal. Press save. So I showed you the test in our API Manager app. Let's do that as well from an outside view. So in this case, as an app developer, I use different tools. So I'm in Postman, and there you see I already played around with it. So I added the parameter meal as request parameter. Previous answer was with drinks and meals, and when I now press send, it calculates, and then we only get meals back, and same applies for drinks as well. So seeing is believing. I tested here. There we go. All right. What have we seen so far? We exposed an API, and now we fine-tuned the integration or the implementation to reduce the amount of data that we need there and make it filterable via parameter or maybe via different API resources that we add somewhere. But the implementation principle or the configuration principle is always the same. Just attach an, some parameters or some things that you read from your TPM, from your entities, etc., and configure it there. Okay, now we could say it's done, that's it. But what we learned so far is that when we call some APIs, the result or the response time is sometimes pretty high, sometimes pretty low. So with 500 milliseconds, which is still high, and we go through and we want to address that. So one of the things that we can do, and this perfectly applies for this scenario, is when you have static content or content that changes not a lot, you can use caching mechanisms. You can implement that on your own, or you can use the default implementation in the API gateway. And I want to just show you how easy it is to add a caching into your API for certain resources or for the whole API. To do so, I have to go to those two tabs. One is the inbound policy, and inbound policies are used for everything that is hitting the gateway until it is forwarded or before the gateway is calling the backend or the implementation. That means everything there, what you define, is for that part of the route. If we're looking at the outbound policy, this is part when the result from the implementation or from the integration system is coming back, then you handle things there. And when we're talking about caching, it's twofold. So first of all, we have to store the information and we have to make it available. And on the other hand, we have to react on a call and see whether there is an entry in there, which I can report back to the caller. So first things first, we have to react on what comes back from our implementation. So you go to add policy, caching, cache store, edit there, define how long the cache should be valid. And you can select it there, press save, and that's the first thing. So now we store the data. But what we need to do as well is we have to access the cache so we can make use of it. And therefore you go to the inbound policies, click on add policy, caching, get response from cache, and then the simple cache is added in here, and you see it's described how the caching algorithm works in terms of how he decides how it decides whether there is a hit or not. So let's press save here as well. Press deploy. The changes have to be deployed on the gateways. And then we go to Postman and press send. And you see, it still took a long time. So we changed the process, that's where it took a little longer. And now we press send again. And now you see that the API cache with all the latency between our test setup. By the way, this is at least 3 hops between virtual networks in this scenario. So from my machine over VPN to our OpenStack machine, through some virtual routers into virtual machines again, and so on. So you see that this significantly reduces the amount of time it needs for returning a result via the API. Okay, just to recap again, it's rather easy to add caching. We have talked about the principles of inbound and outbound policies, and that you have deploy things, and that for static workloads, this really enhances the performance of your system. Okay, so now we exposed it, we implemented it, we added some caching functionality. What else is missing? We talked about security. And the simplest way when you were talking about security is authentication. And therefore, we again add or jump to the inbound policies, and then we go to access restriction, and then add authentication. For demo purpose, we decided to go with our own user management service authentication, which we just add here, as simple as that, and say we want to authenticate with a basic authentication with the users which are available within the UMS. But you can as well add things like add external IDPs like validating JOTs from an OAuth flow, for example, or add support for Azure Active Directories, etc. You can also do manual checks on headers, etc. So yeah, a lot of possibilities here. But for UMS authentication, just press save, and you probably guessed it, deploy it to the gateways. So the policies are set to active. Done. Let's go back to the API catalog and press tests, and then select the parameter, like for example, the meal, and press send request. And there we go, we get the 401 unauthorized. We just forgot to authenticate. So to avoid this, there is, oh, I have to refresh. We have to use this authorize button up here because we added there. You see, I've used it a few times before, so my authentication credentials are saved. You just press authorize. Now I'm here as user Michael. Go to tests, select the parameter like drink, press send request, and there we go. We are again authorized. By the way, if your Swagger file contains, let me just wait a sec. Let me just reload this real quick. If you do not authorize, by the way, this is invalidated as soon as you leave the screen. When you now press test, I did not refresh before. It also warns you about that you have no authorization settings set. So yeah, it's a better idea to do that up front. And by the way, same thing applies for the outside world. So let's go to authorization, select basic auth, and press send. There you see, you probably have the wrong password. When we type in the right password, we get through and the drinks come back. And we are at least a little bit more secure with the basic authentication approach. Okay, so what have we seen in the last portion? Adding authentication is as easy as adding a policy. Depending on your use case, you can define whether you use our own user management service for API key and basic authentication, or using external IDPs, IAMs, with an OAuth flow or a generic JOT flow or an Azure Active Directory. And that brings me to the end of this presentation. So Dick, can you bring back the screen to Christian's machine so we can continue in the slides?
Sure.
I see the query, 1 second. There we have it.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions?
Exactly.
Perfect. So thank you very much, Christian and Michael, for the presentation and the demonstration. We are now on the question slide. I have one question in the box, so we'll come to this in a second, but you still have the time, yeah, to write down your questions, so we can answer them, yeah, real in live in this session. The question we have in the box is yeah, remark as well as maybe a question. I will yeah, try to summarize it. First of all, I think that's good feedback. So cool. So I think that's related to your session you're doing at the moment.
Thank you very much.
And now I assume you can utilize internal and external APIs in the same app. So that's kind of a question, would say. And then
yeah,
maybe you can give a note.
Yeah, let's take the first one. Otherwise, I forget the second part or third part, or how many parts are coming in there. So basically, yes. With the application, you've seen the things like tagging. So you could use a tag like internal or external. Christian already mentioned that using different gateways. We did not jump into the configuration of so-called gateway groups, and that is the kind of management portion where you deploy some APIs, and you could have an internal or external facing, or multiple internal and external facing gateway groups, and you can decide which APIs are going to which gateway group, and you can decide as well which users can see the APIs in the API catalog via the audiences feature. So yes, you can do that in the same application.
Okay, and then a follow-up pointing to the theory. Let's say what Christian mentioned. If no eyes in-house API, then call outside API. Correct. So is something like that possible? If you first check internally if an API is available, we can call, and if this is not available, we can call another one which is located outside.
So I will take over the question, because it's on the theory part, but it's an implementation or a configuration issue. So yeah, sure. The condition that we added there, or also if you can add not only conditions that are from input parameters, but they can also be from the results. So the query that you put into the condition can also react on stock is empty or whatever. Or you have other possibilities, like, for example, evaluating things in mapping as content extractor, whatever. So all the benefits or all the functionalities that you have in the integration suite can be used to achieve your goal in the API integration.
Basically, you have the whole Swift knife and the knife of the API integration in the background.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Feedback is great. Thank you. Excellent. So I think you had the point. Good.
So, thanks for the feedback.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah, at the moment we do not have any additional questions, so let's go further and look also to next week. So here again, what I mentioned in our in the initial slides, we will have a survey. This will come up after we close the webcast. Please take the minute to rate the session, and also give us feedback what is interesting in addition on your side, so we can influence the overall planning of our Meet the Expert webcast based on your feedback. Thank you for that. And yeah, looking to the next Meet the Expert live webcast, which is running April the 26th. Again, a Tuesday, and our speaker for the next webcast is Nadia Kosova. She will do a session about migrating to S4HANA and how to onboard your B2B partners. Also a very interesting topic, and if you are already running into a migration to S4HANA, I think it's worth attending this webcast as well. Yeah, if you want to join, just go to our website and register for the session. Yeah. Good. Finally, we'll have a quick look into the question and answer box once again. No additional questions, so I think we had a nice and hopefully interesting webcast for you as well. And if you have any additional questions, also technical questions, you can directly send your emails to my colleague Ines Köstler or myself directly, and we will then forward the questions to Christian or Michael, so they can get in contact with you directly afterwards. So that's it from my side. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope to see you again in one of our next webcasts we are offering. And yeah, wish you a great day ahead, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a nice day.